This is Let's Talk, getting to the root causes of the important issues of the day. This on-the-air community forum believes that your voice matters and welcomes all thoughts and views without judgment. Please join today's conversation by calling 415-663-8492, or you can tweet us at Let's Talk on KWMR.
Yes, and that voice you might have recognized. You might have heard her on this show. When was that? Quite a while
ago.
Robin Carpenter is here in the studio, and so is Shelley Rugg, and I'm Paul Raffel. And yes, do give us a call about this subject that I'm about to tell you about. 415-663-8492. When you call in, you'll hear a little buzzy electronic noise as I put you in the system. Just hang on until you hear me say you're on the air, and then give us your name, and please keep the language clean. You'll be live on the air. So, today's subject.
Yes, what is it? Yes, Paul, the secret subject.
The secret subject. Novel ecosystems.
Novel,
yes.
And by novel, how would you describe that? Do you mean ecosystems in flux or ecosystems being protected in an unusual manner?
Well, so let me read you a definition from the person. He's an ecologist. Hobbs is his name, and he's in Australia. He defined it as a system of abiotic, biotic, and social components and their interactions that, by virtue of human influence, differ from those that prevailed historically, having a tendency to self-organize and manifest novel qualities without intensive human management.
Yikes.
Novel ecosystems are distinguished from hybrid ecosystems by practical limitation on the recovery of historical qualities, meaning...
Yes, please.
There's a bit of a fight going on among restoration ecologists and conservationists about what's worth saving and which ecosystems are worth just preserving as they are and watching them and actually studying them. So compromised ecosystems, as they used to say, which are now being called novel ecosystems, and some ecologists are saying, "Oh, that's catchy." Yeah, it sounds catchy. It's nobody wanted to, for a long time, nobody has studied them because they regarded them as compromised and therefore lost. Like one example that they keep bringing up is an old tree plantation. So an old, like a fir tree lumbering operation. And it gets shut down, nobody's tending it anymore, and it creates a whole ecosystem that is actually, in the case that is quoted in one of the articles I read, it was far more full of life than the native forest. It created shade for the natives to come up. It created habitat for all kinds of wildlife. So it's as much an ecosystem. It's worked out how to become its own ecosystem, and yet nobody wants to study it except these radicals who are saying, well, maybe this is worth studying. Maybe we should look at this and actually study how ecosystems form and not try to go in there, cut down every pine tree and recreate
a forest from 100 million years ago.
Yeah, right, exactly. Where do you draw that line?
This
1,000 years ago? Before
invasives,
human?
right? Yeah. That we introduce something into the environment, so it's not supposed to be there, so we need to get rid of it. What if we let it become its own new ecosystem?
Exactly. And one of the great justifications for that, well-meaning people, there's a local guy, I'm very respectful of what he does around the bay and around the land here. He's a great activist for clean ecosystems. But people, well-meaning people who love nature are willing. It's not my first choice, he says, would be willing to go out there and spray
herbicides and poisons.
And poison these plants, the immigrant plants, right? Because... Well,
that's a big conversation that needs to be had about glyphosate. You would think at this point people understand what the glyphosate does, other than just thinking
thinking of it as an abstract poison in our environment, what's the specific impact that it has on us?
And the fact that it has so much drift factor. Now we're finding glyphosate even when they tested wines throughout California. Even biodynamic and organic wines have it in there,
right?
Because you can't. It's in the water table. It's all
in the soil.
All the wishes that it would be biodegradable and disappear were PR wishes, not reality wishes. And you also have an issue that we have, which I've always brought up, having also, since, as many listeners might know, I do the Farm and Food Shed report, and where the majority of the dairy ranchers, I think almost all of them now in the Point Reyes National Seashore, are all organic, but yet the park's encouraging them to spray glyphosate. And they said, no, we deal with thistles, invasive, things like that ourselves. We hand pull them, we mow them before they seed. So we have this odd irony of this. We must get rid of the cattle and the ranchers in the park, but yet we'll spray poison throughout the park, even though they're good stewards of the land. And because properly grazed grasslands and natural pasture lands sequester far more carbon than and have far more wildlife diversity than if you take the cattle off, it turns to coyote shrub, which has only about 30% of the diversity of properly grazed.
I remember hearing you say that while I was driving, listening to Farm and Food Shed report. Monday is at noon.
High noon.
You were talking to Nicolette, I think, Nyman, and you said that, and I'm going, wait a minute. There's more diversity in grasslands, in introduced grasslands than...
this would be naturally grasslands area along the coast. That's its natural thing. So during the Pleistocene, when we had all these megafauna herding and chasing the smaller, ungulates and hoofed creatures, it created the proper disruption and distribution of all the kinds of animals. It also sequesters more carbon than scrubland because it's a whole system, and that's why holistic agriculture and holistic grazing, you herd your animals as if they're being herded by large predators through the land, like the work being done at Pepperwood Preserve.
Right.
And so a lot of this is the science on this is it's hard to kind of study it, but people like John Wick with the Marine Carbon Project, they've done it and shown the amazing increase in carbon sequestration with just compost from animal on grasslands. And so it's a really growing area that as we're now in the Anthropocene age, which means we can no longer pretend that we're not part of the flora and fauna.
And that brings up the question. Are not all ecosystems now novel ecosystems because we are changing the climate globally? Therefore, every ecosystem is changing. I mean, there is no ecosystem that is not changing thanks to us. So where do you draw that line? What do? You put a dome over the park and say this is how it's supposed to be? You turn it into museum pieces. This is one of the quotes. You're trying to create a museum of what we think it looked like 1,000 years ago.
Oh, like on Star Trek when they land in the False Eden.
Yeah. And I've always felt like it, to me, just instinctually, to say this is a wilderness area. And then over here are human. It's sort of like, okay, humans can have these areas and trash them.
Well, here's the thing.
Then we'll hold a pure wilderness area here. Then it's creating this mindset of when humans are somewhere, it's bad. Instead of how do we interact as part of the ecosystem?
How can we integrate with each other?
And where humans are, it is bad. But look what we're doing.
Look around us. We're pretty good.
Everything, as I wrote in a piece somewhere. What about adaptation? Nature is the best
That was an interesting movie
for adaptation. Yes, it was. But for adaptation, nature will adapt. It may not do it in our lifetimes, and that's the problem. Is that we have this short attention span of 100 years or less, and ecosystems evolve all the time. Some ecosystems are always new from one year to the next, always encountering new species. It might not be from another country, but from just 100 meters upstream. So
I just see that from just having been back home from in Alabama on the Gulf Coast where my family's from. And so I've watched over the past 30 years, and especially after the BP oil spill, all the shifts. Like one of our jewels of the Gulf of Mexico are these shrimp called Royal Red shrimp that taste like lobster and are gorgeous. But because of the spill, they aren't as resilient and haven't adapted. And so the brown shrimp, which some people consider invasive because they didn't used to be very many of them, have sort of taken over. And then we also have these fish, the lionfish, that I guess came in from Indonesia, which are really taking over, especially along the Florida coastline. So
they're the ones with the poisonous spines.
Yes, you don't, but they're very good to eat. So now there are all kind of beneficial tax breaks and things that fishermen will go out and fish the heck out of them, and chefs are working really quickly to find ways to cook them, and then they're trying to find ways to get the consumers along the coast. So if we act as part of the ecosystem and something gets out of whack, then, okay, we need to eat more of it. We don't need to go poison the lionfish. Let's see, can we eat it? What can we do?
How
can we work with this situation that's emerged out of things we've done or changes in
it's an immense industry, this restoration industry. A lot of people depend on it for their income, of course, and national parks and state parks get lots of money to spray or to manage weeds, let's put it that way. It's a huge industry, and the chemical companies love it, and we're trying.
Isn't Monsanto running the EPA right now?
Yeah, basically.
Kind of. Well,
But so we're spending all this time and energy trying to keep out the effects of. Trying to eradicate species, which has never worked. I don't think anyone's ever eradicated a species willingly, right?
And with climate change,
we're wiping out species left, right, and center with our...
I mean, the other thing I saw back home, which is amazing and a little bit daunting whenever I've thought about, well, maybe I'll retire back there behind enemy lines. And,
oh, dear.
And, and do the things I loved doing growing up, going floundering and crabbing and fishing off the piers and, just be the crazy old lady out there with my fishing poles and my hat. But now we have higher levels of this bacteria that's sort of like a MRSA that you're fishing out of your boat and you get a little scratch and it gets in your system and you're a goner in a few days. So, So you have all these new threats, but the biggest change that I've seen, when I was a kid, we would go swimming and they'd say, oh, if you're going to swim in the pond over there, check how many alligators are lined up sunning on the beach. And every now and then look over, and if there's one or two less, get out. And so, we just kind of grew up with the alligators. The alligators have now, because they were an endangered species when I was a child, and they never used to be north really of about 20, 30 miles off the coast. Right. They're now all the way up into Tennessee. They've gone all the way through Alabama. They're up into Tennessee. They're in the Carolinas. They have completely covered the southeast. And
so this is how it'll end.
And this is,
devoured by alligators.
But
alligators on a plane.
But it's totally changed, like, my friends who kayak now, they're like, they want higher up, they're in a canoe.
And so is anyone saying, well, we've got to get rid of these alligators? Are they trying to get them out of there, eradicate them?
They're allowing them to be hunted now. I think that I think just how in the state of California, we have no limit and no season on wild pigs, or the feral pigs that run wild in California, because you'd have to kill 75% of them every year in order to keep them at their same level they're at right now. Wow. And so with the alligators, my personal belief is because they are such a threat now to pets, to toddlers, to humans, that we need to seriously hunt them back because they have no other predator other than down in the Everglades. Now we've got all the pythons in there. So it's a completely different ecosystem with the, like 100 times more alligators.
So there's the question then, do you try to wipe out the alligators? They're not supposed to be there.
What they've done is increase hunting of them
years ago.
And increased hunting of the pythons. You can hunt the pythons. They have big rodeos. But there's no way the amount that at this point we would have to take out. So it means places that used to be swimmable and great places to go fishing in a kayak or a canoe like I used to.
Alligator in the swimming hole.
You don't. Yeah, you don't. And
you give us a call, won't you, if you're listening to this? We'd like to hear, I think what we want to hear is your opinions on how far is too far in trying to mend the damage that is being wrought on the ecosystem, and at what point, there are several questions actually, at what date do we set the ecosystem line that everything has to go back to that if we're going to restore it? It has
like
to go
making
back to
America great again, for example.
1742 or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
And how much is too much? And what do you think about allowing novel ecosystems to exist? Oh, like the eucalyptus. 415-663-8492 or 8317. Give us a call. Eucalyptus, that stand of eucalyptus trees down there on the Bolinas Road, Highway 1, coming into Bolinas. Stands of eucalyptus trees are now needed by monarch butterfly. And monarch butterflies did not used to be here, by the way. They are an invasive species.
they adapted.
Oh, boy.
I say wipe out the monarchs. But no, people want to, there's a big movement to cut down all the eucalyptus everywhere because they're non-native. But we have a caller. Caller, you're on the air. What's your name, please?
Hi.
Hey.
My name's Melinda.
Hey, Melinda.
Hey, Melinda.
This book by Colin Tudge called About Trees. But this quote jumped out at me, and I'm going to read it to you real quick. But if we could take a time-lapse view of all the world this past few million years, as cold has followed warm has followed cold, we would see what a vast and apparently immovable forests flitting over the surface of the globe like the shadows of cloud. In other words, ecosystems move all the time. We just sped them up because we're really speedy. We love speed. Species, and we've got the technology to go with it. Yeah, and the whole thing about using pesticides or herbicides to control non-natives is a real scam. But anyway.
Well, so you're saying your preferred position would be to let what ecologists regard as damage, let the damage occur and see what develops.
Well, apparently, especially, see what develops. And if we would just slow down enough to watch what's happening, we could, and it's great. I liked your example in your blurb about, was it football fields or golf courses or anyway.
No, I forget what it was. The Hawaiian forest, for example.
Well, the Hawaiian forest is completely moved in from was brought by the Polynesians, and then more stuff has come.
They introduced rats. And,
so
you go back before the
Hawaiian. Mongoose in there to get rid of the rats, and we forgot that one's nocturnal and one's diurnal.
That's that. Just a side note there about the mongoose in Hawaii. I went to the Bishop Museum. I used to live there. I went to the Bishop Museum, and they had a stuffed mongoose, and they showed it in their native habitat, and it was a stretch of tarmac with a yellow line going down.
I saw them in India.
Yeah.
But there people were much more okay with letting things be. The oxen are wandering around, and people are eating vegetables that are growing in empty, what we would consider damaged ecosystem or something, empty lots and the side of the road. And
exactly. Empty lot. Sort of urban lots have an ecosystem of their own. They may not be pretty, but there's a lot of life going on.
And it changes. Because life, anyway.
Yeah, or like when somebody dumps something in the sea, and then it slowly starts teeming with life itself.
Yeah, true.
How it used to make coral reefs, dropping off old cars and things out into the ocean for fishing off of, or the drilling wells like in the Gulf of Mexico.
But it is a good question, like if you're going to try to repair the perceived damage, where exactly are you going back to? What state? And, things do change over time. Things evolve. People have been nomadic. Animals migrate. Things move. Plants move. And so, how much are we just imposing control on something that maybe we need to just observe?
Yeah.
I agree. That's my point.
Well, dig up a thistle, or if thistles are growing and they're in your way and they're hurting you or your animals or whatever, dig them up.
Dig it up.
Sure. Or cut them down before they seed.
And there's some different kinds of thistles, and there's a couple. There's
There you go.
a native thistle here that's not real prickery. My daughter cultivates it. And
Prickery.
It has a lovely blossom, And,
Really?
Well, artichokes are thistles, aren't they?
Yeah.
It's all part of the thistle family.
Yeah.
Melinda, I have a question, because part of what I have seen too is that we are part of the flora and fauna, so we can also have a reaction, and part of it, like eat more lionfish if there are too many lionfish coming in, but this whole concept of approaching it from this very chemical, profit-based, that actions we take, like, okay, there are too many lionfish, we eat extra lionfish, as opposed to actions we take by spraying glyphosate on Scotch broom that then impacts life, all other forms of life.
Yeah,
well, how do you feel about us humans as part of the fauna and our interaction?
That would be the intelligent human being, But I think the what you said, profit-based, is also very key. If it wasn't this bottom line thing that seems to go with our version of capitalism, there wouldn't be this rush to make more and do whatever you want. Do whatever makes money.
Yeah.
That's, we're up at night. It's Pisces. Anyway, it was a very interesting show. Thank you.
Thanks
for
Melinda.
calling,
Thanks for
Linda.
calling.
Okay, bye.
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 Yeah, 663-415-663-8492 or 8317. Give us a call. Tell us, maybe we're on the wrong track here. I never knew about novel ecosystems. I'd never heard of it, and just read this article, and suddenly there's a whole new thing that I have homework to do on. And I think about, one of the glaring examples of what of trying to wipe out eradicate a species from just a piece of land. Millerton Park.
Oh, yes.
What's the story, people?
There were acacia trees, really healthy acacia trees, like 3 of them, but huge acacias, right above the beach. And so they would hang over, and you couldn't get through. If it was high tide, you couldn't walk the beach. And, of course, in those days, you could still walk your dog on the beach there. You can't do that anymore. And dog walkers were upset that these trees were in their way. So they made enough fuss that the state... Is it state park? Yeah.
It's a state park.
State park comes in and employs a contractor or convict labor or somebody to come in. They came in, they chopped down everything, chopped them all down to the ground, but they were already seeding. They'd gone through the flowering stage, the seeds. So they chopped everything down, left most of the debris there. They even cut down a fir tree that was there and cut that down. The trunk is still on the beach, what hasn't washed up the bay, and so pretty soon up come millions of seedlings.
Oh, dear.
Acacia. And acacia, once it starts, wow. It was contained, there was beautiful trees, yellow blossoms. So it turned into this huge thing. Then I'm walking down there one day, and there's a guy. They're painting Roundup onto painting
on
herbicide. Actually, 2,4-D, I think it was, maybe.
I think that's what they're using more now because it's stronger than glyphosate.
Yeah. So they were
It's related to Agent
painting
Orange.
every seedling. There were 5 guys going along this stretch of beach, the cliff above the beach, the knoll above the beach, and they were painting each stalk that was coming up after they'd cut it. And it's this wasteland, it's just, they just turned it into a wasteland
and for the dog walkers.
from a beautiful, healthy actual ecosystem. And behind it, of course, on Millerton, it's all native grassland. It's and lovely, and boy, is it lush now.
And you think, too, about the people walking their dogs through there with the glyphosate glyphosate on the ground
Yeah,
and freshly
exactly.
painted, and
and the kids playing, and
We made a bit of a stink about it, but of course.
rodents
to no
eating
avail.
things and things eating the rodents.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And of course, where they disturb the ground, what comes up? Thistles. Big, healthy, juicy thistles. Beautiful.
All right.
fun to walk through.
And they're 6 foot high now
Oh, dear.
because the soil is so great. And thistles will survive almost anything.
It's interesting that people are put in charge of this kind of task who apparently didn't know what would happen, what would result from their actions.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they probably wouldn't have shown up later to put that horrible poison on all those little sprouts.
Which has been just so much a part of what the state and the feds have done. And the county now, of course, is taking that out of their plan for...
good. Yeah, right. Yeah,
remember,
Marin
they
County,
removed glyphosate from that. But I think that also there's that whole thing of when is an invasive no longer an invasive? Everything's an invasive. Everything got spread by birds and animals. And
there's the Aeolian zone. One of Donna's favorite things was that there's this zone. In fact, in over your head, the size of a top hat, there are millions of microbes just swirling around right there. But up in the jet stream that goes all over the globe, there are spiders floating along. There's
right.
They find spiders on tourist. So there are seeds and spiders circling the globe.
I remember after Big
And as the jet streams change, of course, those seeds and spiders are going to shift.
So a little absurd, really.
Yeah.
To actually think that we can freeze the planet in place. I remember after
changes.
hurricanes where I grew up that the following spring you would see all kinds of flowers and things you'd never seen before. Or birds would have gotten blown. I remember there were some hummingbirds that were indigenous to Cuba that showed up after we'd had a big hurricane down there. Yeah. And so things are,
always moving, always changing.
Those old stories about rainfalls of fish, fish falling from the sky and all that. Yeah. Anyway, this is KWMR 90.5 FM in Point Reyes Station, 89.9 in Bolinas, 92.3 in the San Geronimo Valley, cablecasting on Horizon Cable 47, and streaming live online 24 hours a day at kwmr.org. And support for KWMR's programming, including disaster response, is provided by the Point Reyes Disaster Council, working with KWMR in Point Reyes Station, Inverness Park, Inverness, Olima, and Marshall to keep the community informed during an emergency. Information on volunteering at 415-663-8400. That's 415-663-8400. 8400. And we're also getting support from the Point Reyes Light, an independent and locally owned newspaper telling West Marin stories since 1948, featuring award-winning reporting, essays, opinions, a community events calendar, and the sheriff's calls. Office and newsroom open Monday through Thursday in downtown Inverness. Subscription, classifieds, calendar, and advertising information, plus letter to the editor forms, are available at ptreyslight.com, and that's PTREYES light.com, or at 415-669-1200. And we're also supported by To Celebrate Life, Breast Cancer Foundation, raising funds to help underserved women and men living with breast cancer. Through its Bay Area Breast Cancer Grants Program, the foundation supports nonprofits that provide direct and emergency services and believes that no one should face breast cancer alone. Information about how to get involved is available at tocelebratelife.org.
I wanted to mention Aldo Leopold. Because he is somewhat of a darling of the conservation movement. But he also says, in that conservation, biologists argue with each other about, some say nature should be protected for humans, others say it should be protected from humans. But Aldo Leopold really talked about our connection to the land and where we get in trouble kind of to synopsize him is that when we see land as a commodity to be used by us as humans, rather as a community to which we belong, and when we're approaching the land and the planet as a community in which we belong, he says many beautiful interactions can happen with humans working the land or working with the animals, and talks about going across places in the Great Southwest where he saw where there had been centuries of Native Americans, say, terracing an area, and the beautiful nature of the land and animals in that area. And so that it's really, it really is a mindset shift, and that he was very much for land and people together in community, not land as a commodity, and that's the point where we're lacking in the appropriate consciousness towards it.
Yeah, it's sort of like us and them in a way, like human land or human nature, and not seeing that we are part of that same nature.
We're one of the few places. Mark Dowie wrote about that. I can't remember the name of his book about indigenous people being driven out of. And the one before that, too.
In Yosemite.
In Yosemite, and driving indigenous people out who've lived in harmony with the land for thousands of years. But they were
so dirty.
They were so dirty, and they
didn't speak English.
They didn't build fences, so obviously they were not using the land properly.
So he talked about that, and Mark was also talking about how in the rest of the world you find in their national parks in other countries that they're having lots of ranching and farming in holistic, very healthy ways going on, like this wonderful interaction with the land that for some reason our conservationists here in the States, many of them the wilderness, quote unquote, preservers, just won't go there. It does not fit their mindset.
Right. Well, so, we're talking today about novel ecosystems, which is a fairly new term about ecosystems that have been altered by human activities and then has fallen into disuse by humans, but is creating ecosystems that are growing and creating their own support for life and diversity within them. They've been the pariah of the ecological movement, and nobody wanted to study them until recently. And now we're saying some ecologists are saying, why don't we study them and just preserve them the way they are? Let them find their own balance. So the opposite side, he acknowledges. This is Peter Vitusek, who's at Stanford University. He acknowledges the services that novel ecosystems provide, noting they may even support native biological diversity in some important circumstances. But, he adds, as with many good ideas, tolerance of novel ecosystems can be taken to an extreme at which it is no longer useful. So that's the fear of traditional restoration ecology, is that people would just start saying, oh, well, we're not going to do anything about it anyway. We're not even going to try to get rid of the thistles or whatever you want to try to get rid of, because everything's changing anyway. Could that be taken to an extreme where nothing gets done, and then, an interesting experiment?
What would happen? Yeah.
What would happen?
How bad would it be?
I mean, to me, it would be
pampas grass everywhere.
As long as
I like the stuff myself.
As long as we're doing things in a way that is regenerative.
Well,
as opposed to any interference, just like all the work that's being done on with cattle and decreasing desertification. I could never say that correctly. And all the work that's being done in that arena with Alan Savory and turning, you can go on their website, Savory Institute, and see large patches of desert, and they've run tons of cattle and antelope and whatever in there is turned to grassland.
Yeah, well, that's the land that is in use by humans to grow food and do that, and people that are doing that, wonderful.
But if before it had turned to desert because of the loss of megafauna,
so they're reclaiming
and
desert,
so they're reclaiming desert into grassland, which sequesters more carbon.
Right.
So therefore, even if you weren't eating the animals, you need to have those animals to be getting that kind of desert environment shifted back to what it originally was, which were grasslands.
Give us a call, 1-415-663-8492. We'd love to hear your opinions about novel ecosystems. Where do you draw the line? Should we let new ecosystems that contain invasives, should we leave them alone? Should we try and eradicate some of the invasives? Should we somewhere strike a middle ground, maybe cut down a few eucalyptus and leave the rest for the monarch butterflies? Here's another ecologist at Syracuse. I think celebrating novel ecosystems as equivalent or improved is not appropriate. And he, as an example, he points to Clear Lake in Northern California, where the number of fish species has risen from 12 to 25 since 1800. Sounds like a success story, but, says Gibbs, species that had been found only in that lake were replaced with fish that are common elsewhere. So there was a net loss in biodiversity. So that's the fear, right? I mean, it's like the plovers out at the beach where they're restoring the native dune grasses, or they're tearing out the invasives and dumping them in a pit and spraying them with Roundup and covering them up.
I think that you have to really...
Are you going to allow a species, a lovely species like the plovers out there, or these fish in Clear Lake?
Or brook trout.
Yeah. Do you try to save them? Yes.
I think you have to pull way up and look at the bigger picture and know that, probably, my grandchildren, if I have any, or my friends' grandchildren, there will not be rainbow trout in most of the streams that we can fish for them around here because it'll be too warm. 2 to 3 degree temperature rise will make it uninhabitable. Right. So you're only going to find this further north. So I believe that, yes, it's unfortunate when, say, in a lake, it maybe happened because somebody let their goldfish go or something. And just like in Florida and the Everglades, all those pythons down there. So they're losing all their land mammals. But oddly enough, a new study just showed that there are some of the land mammals are coming back because the python are eating them at such a high rate that all the rabbits were disappearing, the deer were disappearing, the nutria everything was disappearing, and with the alligators eating the rats and the nutria, so it was suddenly becoming literally zero mammals. So, but then something's balancing out. They aren't quite sure. Maybe the pythons are eating the alligators or whatever. Wow. But there's no way, unless you literally wanted to go nuke the area, there's no way it's going to have to balance itself out. And so at some point there won't be enough mammal life for both to exist at the rate they exist at. Now, that's another reason why alligators are pushing further north. But that's climate change, too. We don't have the cold winters. So
it's like everything you do affects something else.
Exactly.
So there isn't any move that you can make that isn't going to have some kind of impact.
And even if it hasn't been made by us, it's just by virtue of climate change, which I guess it was made by us. Let's see. I can't think of one right now, but I think that, we do have to, where we can mitigate, like, okay, there should be open hunting for alligators and pythons because you can eat the meat or sell the skin and there are too many. But other than that, I think doing things like poisoning and spraying.
Yeah, really. Here's another the novel ecosystem rhetoric is quite damaging, considering that various national and international agencies and treaties, including the European Commission and the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity and Convention to Combat Desertification, have called for increasing restoration efforts, and major NGOs, such as the International Union for Conservation of Nature, the Nature Conservancy, World Resources Institute, and the Worldwide Fund for Nature, have advocated large-scale restoration as part of their global programs. More
but again,
specifically,
restoration to what?
To what, yes. Yeah. More specifically, in 2011, the German government and the IUCN challenged the world's nations to restore 150 million hectares of deforested and degraded lands by 2020. And Brazil is intending to restore 15 million hectares.
Now, I believe in that 100%.
Okay.
Because if you're using methods, just like permaculture and regenerative agriculture, using methods, because the planet, if we've taken an ecosystem and basically kind of stripped it, that's a different matter than an ecosystem shifting or lakes biology shifting.
So like cutting down the rainforest.
Yeah, right. Cutting down the rainforest and desertification, and if there are ways we can go in and make those, first of all, by restoration, that they would sequester more carbon, which helps with climate change. By restoration, they could become grasslands that have herding animals that can provide food. And by restoration, that we can provide more habitat.
Well, but isn't that part of the deforestation in the Amazon basin is for cattle? Isn't that part of it? I mean, palm oil is the big thing now.
Most of it's palm oil and soy, actually. So cattle has been, which is a whole other side story, cattle has sort of was demonized, but it's actually more for soy and palm oil.
Palm oil.
So, and to cut down a forest that's a native forest for cattle to run is an abomination. But to take a desert area and see if you can run cattle there and get some of the native grasses back, that's a great idea.
But it would be interesting to see what happens to the palm oil plantations if they were abandoned. That's a novel ecosystem. Once it's abandoned, not being used by humans anymore, not being used for agriculture.
Do you want to take that back to
Do you cut
what
them
it was?
all down? Do you try to rebuild the hardwood forest? I mean,
Sort of like the commons in Point Reyes. Right? Because
Do tell.
it was planted and tended by the community, cared for, and then when that ability was taken away, now it sits
a novel ecosystem.
And it becomes it's becoming a novel ecosystem. It's just doing its own thing. Nobody see it. I mean, if anyone is tending it, please accept my apologies, but it doesn't look the same.
No, it doesn't.
And that is happening right here in our community.
Well, we'll see what happens there. Maybe eucalyptus will take root. We'll get
a bunch of thistles.
We'll get monarch butterflies downtown. The eucalyptus thing is really something that sticks out. And, because that's been going on for years. People have been wanting to cut down the ukes wherever they see them in California because they're not from here. And yet...
Gosh, they're so beautiful.
Yeah, but before the eucalyptus was here, I think the monarch butterflies
didn't come
here in great numbers. I think they started migrating during human habitat. Since humans have been here, certainly. I mean, Europeans, excuse me, not humans. European humans have been here. So they are basically an introduced species as well. They kind of introduced themselves because there was habitat. And they love the eucalyptus. I mean,
I was just
so if you cut down the eucalyptus,
something
what are you going
about
to plant?
The sense of smell.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it was birds, but I think it might have been insects as well. That their sense of smell, they can smell for miles to find food.
And, it's interesting because I don't know if you guys read the article with, I think it was Mark Dowie being interviewed by Mary Beth Branken in the Point Reyes Light this current issue, talking about EMFs and what's going on with all the different, we're now being inundated and now we're going to,
people are having trouble
sleeping.
sleeping.
And, since that's something that we actually lost our home over, Andy and I, because they built an antenna so strong by the house that no one could live there. Yeah. And so, the fact that one of the things that when we were fighting that, we were finding that we did a survey of bird nests the spring all around within like a quarter-mile radius, and something like 50% of the birds were mutated. The birds that had normally migrated through were hitting windows and things. So that there's also so much on the planet that has been, that gets to places and knows where to go, that's being disrupted because of the level of EMFs basically on the planet now, because it's not just cell towers. It's what everybody has in their home, and they're wireless for their phone, and they're this and they're that, and how that's going to impact migratory patterns and health of animals. So that's another thing that hasn't really had much research.
Bird strikes on windows.
You would think our human health would be enough. It's affecting our human health too.
Well, when they passed that Telecommunications Act in 1996, you're not allowed to bring up health reasons for non-placement of a tower.
Really?
It's illegal by federal law.
Somebody should fight that in court.
We did fight that in court. We lost. And we fought it when it was coming up. It was the Telecommunications Act of 1996 put forth by Clinton and Al Gore, who wanted to make sure the whole country was
but they
wired.
didn't know, and I think
they
back
did
then,
know.
They did.
Yes, there were studies that had shown how dangerous that was. So, and what they did is they made it illegal to fight it, so that the whole country could be equally wired.
There's capitalism at work again.
Yeah, so you could not fight it. The only way you could fight it was on the grounds of property devaluation. If it devalued your property, that was your only lawsuit cause of action.
So what about you? You said that you couldn't live there anymore.
No, and there's a cancer cluster where we lived. We moved out, and we fought it for 2 years legally. We fought it on property value, but another group had brought it on the health incidents that were happening.
And that wasn't allowed.
And I was like, don't talk about that. Literally, the tower was 80 feet from our bedroom window, but a worker on top of the roof, by OSHA standards, could not be allowed to be on that roof for more than 15 minutes in a 24-hour period. But it was legal to. So, so
it was a high-powered antenna.
It was a very high-powered antenna.
It would have reaced here. If it could see here.
It reached anywhere where it wasn't blocked by mountains. It reached to the San Francisco airport.
Yikes.
So we have that other, there are other contaminants happening.
We can't see them, though, so they're not real.
Yeah.
There's something called techno-ecosystems. The concept of techno-ecosystems has been pioneered by ecologists Odom and Nave. Techno-ecosystems interface with and are competitive toward natural systems. They have advanced technology, money-based market economies, and have a large ecological footprint. Techno-ecosystems have far greater energy requirements than natural ecosystems, excessive water consumption, and release toxic and eutrophicating chemicals. Wow. Other ecologists have defined the extensive global network of road systems as a type of techno-ecosystem. There's all that. And the technosphere, the weight of Earth's technosphere, which is all the stuff that we have built and are building, 30 trillion tons, a mass greater than 50 kilos for every square meter of the planet's surface. There you go.
You see in Europe that they are doing things like the big overpasses covered in grass and stuff for making passageways for animals. So I do think that where we can do something that, if you look at it, that probably doesn't have a negative consequence on anything else, as far as we know, unless they put cell towers on them. But well, that's interesting. So we did a show on evolution, microevolution, not long ago. Right. And I read an article saying that sometimes those bridges aren't very good because you get animals coming from different areas using them and intermixing. And there was a case study of a city that had a freeway going two freeways crossing right through the city. And so there were 4 different areas that were cut off, and the local fauna evolved differently, and one of them got this terrible disease, and it could not be transmitted to others. So they all died out in that 1 quarter, but they couldn't get to the other populations, so the other populations were still healthy. Whereas if there'd been a corridor for them to go through, they would have all died.
Oh, wow.
Fascinating.
It's hard work playing God. I don't like being God.
That's it. I mean, we can always improve on nature, can't we? Oh, man. Give us a call. 415-663-8492. We have a few minutes left.
That is a silly position now, isn't it?
Well, it's what we do. We can make this better.
Right.
You guys know about Fred Smith, who is a local here. So he's been, for the past 6 months, going around the world, diving and exploring and reporting on groups working to save coral reefs and to see what's going on there. And he was talking about they've been developing coral, so they're developing corals that can withstand the bleaching things and then transplanting them. So it's a very hands-on way of trying to see how can we save the world's coral reefs. So that's yet another way of where they're raising in labs to see coral, like which ones,
So
not GMO, but hybridizing. Like these ones did great with the extra light and acidity in the water. These did not. So let's breed more of these so that they can kind of quickly hybridize the corals that are more resilient.
Well, so there's an example of novel ecosystems, of these degraded reefs. I mean, we're not really using them. We fish off them and all that, and they're great diversity habitats, but that's a novel ecosystem. So trying to save it, in that case, good thing, as long as we're not introducing some kind of terrible
and then we discovered
robot coral.
The last few years that, no nanobot coral, like nanobot bees. The whole thing about sunscreens killing off,
and all the plastic in the ocean.
Yeah, but nobody realized all the sunscreen was damaging
killing the
reefs.
coral reefs.
Killing the coral reefs.
Hawaii just banned,
they banned
certain sunscreens.
Well, I always thought, I would see my friends when my son was little slathering their babies with all the sunscreen, and I would look and see what's in it, and I'm going like, the skin's the largest organ of the body, and you just dipped your baby in poison, And I was like, I don't think that's a great idea. What about long sleeve shirts and big hats?
And they have spray sunscreens now, which is even worse. Fred was just in Peleliu in northern Palau, out there in the Western Pacific. And when I was out there in the Western Pacific, they were actively trying to turn this beautiful coral atoll. It's where all of Palau basically goes to get their fish. It's a huge atoll, huge lagoon, surrounded by coral, one pass. And there was a plan to have a supertanker transfer port there. So because supertankers had a hard time getting into Japanese ports, they wanted to bring them around from the Red Sea or from the Gulf, Persian Gulf, bring them around and blast a hole in this reef, in this incredible reef, because it was a deep reef, and they could dredge the lagoon out and build docks, and then they would transfer to smaller ships to take the oil to Japan. And it was only because there was a wonderful family of who were blacklisted by the FBI back in McCarthy days, who was still there, and they sort of exiled themselves and moved to the Western Pacific. And Doug Faulkner, underwater photographer, did this beautiful coffee table book, large format, beautiful photographs of the reefs around Peleliu, and they took all that to Congress and they shut it down. Yeah, because it was in the trust territories then. It was a U.S. territory. Yeah. So I say,
yes, Paul,
fight against degradation of ecosystems. And, does that include going in with spray after some of the damage has been done?
No.
Yeah.
We can fight in ways that are regenerative and are healthy, and we can look through the bigger picture too.
As always, prevention is better than trying to cure the disease afterward. Well, thank you all for listening, and thank you for calling Melinda. That was lovely. And Robin, thank you for being here. Thank you for filling in while our other co-hosts are on the road. One of them's in Croatia. My goodness. Having a wonderful time out there. This has been Let's Talk, and we got that sheet of paper. Here we go. I just have it. Yes, thank you. KWMR does not take a stand on any of the issues discussed on Let's Talk. Opinions expressed on this program are those of the hosts and callers and don't necessarily reflect the views of KWMR, its board of directors, underwriters, or members. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Shelley.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you both.
Here we are. We'll be back next week with another brand new show. Stay tuned for New School at Commonweal Conversations. Bye for now.